Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with the Liberated Charles Coulombe.
Liberated freedom! Happy days are here again. The skies above are clear again. Let us sing a song of cheer again. Happy days are here again. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. Yes, the COVID quarantine is over, ladies and gentlemen. Woohoo! And how did I celebrate? Well, I'll tell you. I was freed on the Feast of the Ascension, which this year happened to be the Feast of Our Lady of Fatima. What better way than to go up to Vienna and join the Rosenkranz für Österreich, the Rosary for Austria. And it was wonderful. We started at the Minoritenkirche, and we prayed the rosary and sang hymns and all that. They had a statue of Our Lady of Fatima in the procession. And we went past the Hofburg all the way to the Stephansdom, around the Stephansdom and back. And it was really a wonderful, wonderful experience. Not least because I got to see my beautiful Erster Bezirk, the first district of Vienna, which I really love, the old downtown. And I'll tell you, getting out of stir after 2 weeks, oh man. And I hadn't been to Vienna itself in quite a while either because of the school lockdown. But now that I am a COVID survivor, I can do what I like. And the other thing about it, of course, is that this buys me 3 to 6 months of hassle-free travel. So there's a good chance I could come home in late June, early July.
Isn't that based on what's going on in the United States, though, and not Austria?
Well, it's on both, because I've also got to gauge what it's like going home and also coming back. The reason why I couldn't come home at Christmas or summer was because I was fearful of not being readmitted.
Okay.
Now that I've got my disease, I can go where I like, I can do what I want, safe from any fear of COVID or any regulation or restriction for the next 3 to 6 months anyway.
Boy, you've been away from the United States for a long time, my friend. I don't think that's going to be the case for you, unfortunately, in the United States.
Well, I've been away a year and a half. Have things changed? Is my motherland, my native land different?
Well, we'll see how it goes. I'm not going to predict.
Musso and Frank's have reopened.
Great. That's wonderful. We had our first in-person Knights of Columbus meeting in a long time, just this last week. So that was great. It was great seeing everybody. Yeah.
Well, see, people are everyone's emerging out from under the rocks.
Yeah, and
this will last at least until Newsom's recall election.
And people are.
If he gets reelected, though, all right, everybody back in your homes. You're just being let out to vote for Gavin Newsom. You know that. And as soon as you're not needed anymore, you get to go back in.
Yay.
I should not say such mean stuff. I should say something nice about the state of affairs.
Okay, say something nice.
Isn't it wonderful?
It is. All right.
Plus, you'll be happy to know that I've since I've been certified non-contagious by the Austrian government, I was able to go down to the medical center.
All right, that's great, Charles. Time for the means of production.
Somebody's not going for the bait.
Memes of production.
Do we have...
Nationalize the memes of production for the common good.
You stole it all from me.
We didn't review this before the show, but I showed you this independently earlier this week, so you will know exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Let me just add that impromptu right now. So this is from Anthony Stein on Twitter. And he's got a quote from Hilaire Belloc. And Hilaire Belloc apparently says, "I still don't drink Monster because that Protestant woman said it was satanic. Why risk it?" That's a pretty epic quote from Belloc. How do you feel about that? Do you drink energy drinks, Charles?
Well, I don't, actually. I mean, I drink coffee. That's it.
Why haven't you... So you haven't tried Red Bull or Monster or...
No.
Rockstar or whatever? All these...
I haven't drunk any of that stuff. I drink coffee. I drink tea. I don't do energy drinks. I mean, I've got nothing against them. I just never got into it.
Are energy drinks satanic? I mean, because that's what we're talking about. Hilaire Belloc said they're satanic. So
yeah, that's like another meme. Don't trust everything you see on the internet. George Washington.
I didn't see that one. That's good.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, the internet truly is a strange new world of whatever. It's such a mixed bag of delight and horror.
It is.
I can honestly say that some of my most painful and annoying on the one hand, and some of my most enjoyable and amusing on the other moments have come out of the internet.
Makes sense.
So
yeah.
If you want me to say, is it good or bad? Is the internet satanic? It's only satanic if you use it to spread garbage under a pseudonym. Then it means that you're a servant of the devil and will fry forever. This is a public service announcement brought to you by the 13th floor. Remember, you pseudonymous people, they're waiting for you. And they know who you are, even if we don't. Was that creepy?
Yes. All right.
Have you ever wanted to live in Hackensack, New Jersey?
No. All right, this is going to be a challenge of an episode to get through.
You are not rising to the bait.
What did Betty Davis say a long time ago?
Buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's the case for this episode. That's how I feel right now. So, strap in, everyone.
Oh, man. The boy be out for blood.
All right. So, our first question is from Michael. He says, "Greetings again. Thank you very much for answering my last question, albeit a little belatedly." Michael is the gentleman who asked the romantic question in last episode. Yeah. So he says, albeit a little belatedly, which is understandable due to the deluge of questions flooding the show and my humble gardener status. I would especially like to thank the dutiful Don for providing the panacea for all life's problems, naturally being buying books from Tumblr House. To show my gratitude, I decided to take your advice and purchased Integralism, a manual for political philosophy, from the Tumblr House bookstore for $32 with free shipping and handling. While operators were attentively standing by to let me know that the purchase came with no CODs, was void where prohibited, and had batteries not included, as well as that supplies were limited, and who were therefore urging me to act now while supplies lasted, thereby becoming the first on my block to purchase the book, which resulted in a nocturnal visit from a sketchy-looking Irish policeman, followed by the crashing sound of a window shattering and the discovery in the morning of a mysterious package on my living room floor.
not an actor.
At any rate, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to both Charles and Vincent for their equally helpful answers, and would like to give an update on my situation, along with a prayer request. That being said, and I apologize for the long intro, but having purchased a book out of all of this, I do not think that some elaboration was wholly unwarranted. Agreed. I am happy to report that the girl and I are still friends, and that I resolved the situation by offering her my help if she ever needed it, and asking for her prayers, both of which she graciously accepted. After a few weeks of heartache and emotional pain, which I suppose will never be fully gone, we are now good friends, which I hope will continue to be the case for the years to come. I did take Charles's advice of prayer, saying a novena to Saint Dymphna, who is, among other things, the patroness of emotional trauma, and I now have a newfound devotion to this great saint. Her intercession has certainly been effective, as the pain has greatly lessened since I came back from college for the summer. I'd like to ask for both your prayers that God will lead me to whatever my true vocation is, whether that be another woman, religious life, or the priesthood, and that I may have the wisdom to recognize and accept God's will when the time comes. Thank you both, and may God bless Charles Coulombe, Don Vincenzo, and all of Tumbler House. Christus Resurrexit.
Wow.
Thank you, Michael.
Indeed. Thanks very much. Gosh. Well, and you know, union of prayer is a phrase that I heard, of course, when I was quite young. The older I get, the truer it seems. God bless you, young man, and God guide you all right.
Yes. And also, just as a side note, because everyone who remembers this segment last episode, thank you to everyone who bought Integralism. It's kind of ironic because when we plug a book in a normal, conventional manner, it's usually not too many copies sell, but when we marketed this as a reverse aphrodisiac, the book started flying off the shelf.
Well, it makes a certain sense. I mean, especially think about it. A lot of our viewers are young men. Now, what is the abiding drive when you're a certain age? We didn't go into details. So something that would calm it down, make life easier, more relaxed, less fretful. And nothing says, I'm not really very excited at the moment, as an in-depth treatise on integralism. In fact, here's a way to prove it to yourselves, and I speak here to both gentlemen and ladies. Your next first date, you guys with the chick, you girls with a guy, bring up integralism and this book and see how far the conversation goes.
All right. But I did show Dr. Phimister, one of the authors, our promotion last episode, and he watched and he laughed very hard and said he didn't know how to feel about his book being marketed as a reverse aphrodisiac. So that was very enjoyable for me to show him that. Imagine that, though. Like, you do all the painstaking work of writing this very scholastic, very elevated book, and then you have these two jokers on some show.
Jokers? Let me tell you something. This man is contributing to the moral health of young America. He should be grateful that God so inspired him in this way. This is great. I mean, look, I know that Phimister is a devout Catholic. Can he help but feel rewarded that he has contributed to the moral well-being of young America?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, Dr. Phimister, getting to know him a little better, he is scary intelligent. It actually frightens me. I was talking to him a lot. He's very traditional, and I already learned a lot from him in short discussion, because we were talking about he was defending integralism, and I was talking about syllabus of errors, because I said in my it's my bread and butter because I don't know much, so I always cite the Syllabus of Errors. And he felt that while the Syllabus of Errors is awesome, the structure of it was problematic in terms of being infallible. And he told me that it actually was released on the same day as Quanta Cura, which apparently is infallible and very meaty. I mean, it's something that you cite a lot. So I just thought that was very interesting, his take on that in terms of what to cite for integralist points and stuff like that.
Well, of course, we all know the problem with integralism is that the common good is basically an attack on the Constitution.
Yeah? Tell us more about that.
Well, I mean, it's obvious. If you speak of the common good, you immediately presume a particular vision of what the common good is, right? So for some people, the common good is ensuring that there are enough resources and all that for everyone who wishes to lead a decent life to do so. But for others, it's making sure that everyone has access to abortion. Now, these are two different visions of the common good. For the integralist, a particular vision of the common good has to prevail. But that is a direct attack on our American way of life, which allows everyone to envisage the common good as being whatever they think it is at that particular moment. So you can see why the integralists are evil.
Of course.
You are a hard case today.
Speaking of integralists, for some reason that just reminded me, I need to add Sohrab Ahmari's latest book. He's been plugging everywhere on EWTN.
Whose book?
Sohrab's new book.
Oh,
he just came out with a new book, and I'm very interested in that. I've been watching Tucker interview him, and then on EWTN, Raymond Arroyo, he's really doing the rounds. It's kind of fascinating for an integralist to have this sort of access to the media. It's really cool.
Well, you got to remember, he's a columnist for the New York Post.
Yeah, of course. No, he's big time.
Yeah, and I've met him a couple of times. He's a very good fellow. He's a convert from Islam.
Yeah.
So, you know, my joke to converts about who we cradle Catholics are.
Who? What?
We're the people God knew from all eternity were too stupid to come in on our own.
That's that's actually dead on. That's why I have the utmost respect for converts. I mean, converts make such much stronger Catholics than us weak little cradle Catholics.
Yeah, but we don't need to be strong.
Why?
Because we already have the faith. I went to Catholic school, was taught by nuns. I know.
Okay, a question from Nate.
All right.
I have a very pressing question which was spawned from the last episode's question on romantic love. Whenever I look at couples on social media, I have a hard time being happy for them, which includes friends who I really love and care for. My intention is not to be jealous, but I can't help feeling that way whenever I see people together. Perhaps this comes from my own insecurity or anxiety, especially given the fact that my parents are divorced. I've struggled with Asperger's syndrome all my adult life, and I have never dated a girl. How do I not feel jealous? How do I just let go and let God?
Well, the thing you got to bear in mind about that kind of jealousy is that it's envy. But envy is based upon a misreading of reality. What do I mean by that? You think you want something because you look at it and it looks great, but you're not aware of what it requires to get it and whether or not you'd be willing to pay that particular price. One of the things you've got to bear in mind about, and I know a number of Asperger's people and autistic people, is that one of the effects of the syndrome is that they're very much bound up with themselves. If you want to date a girl, she's really got to become at least as important to you as you are to you. Somebody would have to share the spotlight in your internal drama and do more than share it. And you'd have to dress well. You'd have to behave well. You couldn't do whatever you wanted. You couldn't say whatever popped into your mind. You'd have to use tact, diplomacy, and try to figure out what her interests were ahead of your own. I mean, let's say, for instance, that you love train spotting. You know, going down and watching the trains pull in and out of the station. Some people love doing that. And let's say that you were a real fanatic about it. Well, that might be your idea of a good time. I think there are very few girls who would find train spotting all that interesting. So you would have to give up train spotting time to go see a chick flick or whatever. Now, mind you, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with doing that. I've done it myself. What I am saying is that envy is born from a lack of realization of the cost of things. To attract the love of another person, you have to be willing to die to self. Because they're real people, you say, just as real as you are. And so what you have to do is take into account that the other person is a real person just like you, with their own needs, their own desires, which you have to try to put ahead of your own if you're going to have a real relationship with them. It's as simple as that. Are you really ready or interested in doing that? A lot of people aren't, especially today when we live in this weird, and I'm not only speaking of COVID, but in general, when everyone spends so much of their time entertaining themselves on the internet. How really, really ready are you to have an adult relationship with a woman? To put her interests and what she wants to do ahead of your own. The thing is that so often people are looking for a person who'll be interested in their stuff. I wish I had someone to do my things with. Well, okay. But you've also got to be willing to do their things with them, her things with her. If you're not, that's not a real relationship. If that's the case, then you really should just get a dog. I mean, you have to be willing to commit yourself to another person. And that gets increasingly hard these days, in my observation. But you got to do it if that's what you want. Taking it down from romance for a minute and looking again at the question of envy. In general, I'll tell you something. When I'm at home in California and I'm feeling kind of down, one of the things I like to do is to hop in the car and drive through the beautiful gardens and mansions of San Marino. And they are beautiful. And I feel tremendous. I feel great. But I don't envy the owners of those places this much. Why? Because they've got to go through all sorts of hoops to maintain those places. They've got to pay the taxes. They've got to hire gardeners. They've got to do all kinds of things that I don't have to do in just driving by and enjoying them. And in a sense, they maintain those places for my benefit, and I don't pay a cent to it. So I don't envy them. Similarly, I would tell you, be grateful for what you've got. Don't be envious or jealous. Be happy with what you have. And know that a lot of people would not be willing to pay the price that you have to pay for whatever it is you've got. Now then, in terms of looking at other couples and feeling jealous, there's nothing to feel jealous about. You should feel joy that your friends have found them, have found people. And If you look very closely at them, though, you will very often find that for that couplehood, they have to make concessions that you yourself would never want to make.
How do you know that?
Oh, because I've been a best man 16 times and because I dated a lot when I was younger. That's how I know.
But you're speaking for you, not for Nate.
No, I'm not, but I will lay down the universal law. That is, everything in life costs. For instance, if you're married, you can't just decide you're going to go out with the guys. And you've got to be attentive to what your wife really is saying and wanting and thinking.
Your whole speech, though, seemed to suggest that the costs aren't worth it.
They're not for me, but they are for other people.
But that's a question for Nate, too.
Well, yeah.
Because I don't know. For, in your entire rant, it seemed like, wow, why should anyone embark on the married state? Because it's just, ugh.
No, I wouldn't say it's It has a lot of compensations. Otherwise, people wouldn't do it.
And you didn't mention a single one of them.
Well, that's because I've not had any of them. But the compensations are, of course, certainly there. But what I'm saying, but I'm explaining why he should not envy those who have them when he doesn't. Do you understand? Nate doesn't.
But it's as if like there's no compensation, like because that's what is in his mind is the compensations, and you're acting like, oh yeah, those compensations are negligible compared to the cost.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I would say though that everyone has to decide what they're willing to pay. And what they're getting in return. So take Nate, for instance. Now, he's never dated a girl. Why is that? Obviously, he wants to. But is he shy? Well, the cost of going out of his shell and going towards someone, that's a very high price to pay for some people. For others, it's well worth it.
Yeah, I think we have very different approaches because you say this as a cost. I see it as a benefit. Like this, from like the cost of, oh well, you have to do what this person says. To me, that's learning how to be self-sacrificial. Because I've been single a really long time, and I didn't do much with it. And
I agree with you, but you've got to bear in mind, I've never had a problem reaching out to people. Nate does.
No, I'm just talking about in terms of the semantics. Like you have to like maybe learning how to sacrifice in one's life is something that Nate would find rewarding.
Not only find rewarding, it may be something he absolutely needs to do.
Yeah.
But he's got to bear in mind that to do that, he'll have to leave his comfort zone.
Okay, well, now we're getting into something else.
No, it's the same. I mean, if you're looking at somebody and you're saying, oh boy, I wish I had that. Well, you'll have to do something if you want that. You'll have to leave your comfort zone. You'll have to extend yourself. You will have to be self-sacrificial. Now, I didn't say it wasn't worth it, and I certainly don't say that it shouldn't be done. But you've got to accept the fact that you're not going to be able to sit there as you've done if you want that. And that's where you have to decide whether or not extending yourself, being self-sacrificial, leaving your comfort zone is worth it to you. If it's not, don't envy him. If it's not, then just be happy with what you've got. But if what you've got isn't enough, or you think it's not enough, then you're going to have to go places you've never gone before. As I said earlier, people with Asperger's, their internal focus is all on them. Well, you have to break that.
I don't feel like this dilemma in general is something particular to Asperger's, because I think it's something in all young gentlemen in general.
It is, but it's more so with Asperger's. I mean, trust me, I've lived with Asperger's people. I know. For them to stop and think about someone else is harder than for most people.
I see.
And to get past that, and it can be done. I mean, I know a guy with full-out autism, married, kid, happy as a clam, but he has to force himself because empathy doesn't come to him naturally. He has to force himself. Now, is it worth it? Well, yeah, or he wouldn't be married. But it is an extra effort. And he realized he had to do it. And you can say to me, it sounds like a cost. Well, I don't have Asperger's. It's no cost to me. I never had any trouble reaching out. But I know it is for those who have it.
I see.
And they have to, remember we're talking about Nate. Nate has Asperger's.
I see.
So he has got to pay the price, yes, of pushing out beyond himself. Now, in terms of compensation, it won't just be about chicks. His social life will expand. Because, what's true of girls is true of friends in general. Your friends give what they get. And you can't expect your friends to be all about you. You've got to be all about them as well. I'm willing to wager that Nate probably doesn't have a lot of close friends. But it takes an effort to get them. It takes an effort to keep them. Is he willing to pay that price? I have a ton of friends. I'm quite willing to pay that price. But I know that it has to be done. I've got to be as much interested in what you're doing as you are in what I'm doing, or we're not really friends. It just doesn't work that way. If every time you and I spoke, I said, "Okay, all right, Billy, that's enough about me. Let's talk about my work." I think you would find our relationship to be somewhat tedious.
Yeah.
But if I were, now mind you, I do find your life and your doings generally interesting. But let's say I didn't. Let's say that I was an Asperger's or an autistic person. I would have to remind myself consciously, in a way that I personally don't have to do. I would have to remind myself consciously, okay, now I've got to find out what's going on in Vinny's life.
Got it.
Most of us don't have to do that. But if you're on the spectrum, as they say now, because, like, what was it earlier? Transvestitism, we don't say that anymore. It's cross-dressing. Well, similarly, we're not supposed to say Asperger's or autistic anymore. You're on the spectrum.
I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, you see, you got to keep up. Remember, as soon as the lingo changes, the former lingo becomes not only outmoded but derogatory. And you really should be canceled for having used it. If Nate didn't actually have Asperger's, I would recommend that we cancel him because he used an outmoded term. It's like tuna fish.
Yeah, so a lot of thought-provoking things. But I guess I was looking at it from a broader perspective. There's a trend in general, not just in relationships, but in life, where young men look at things and they say, wouldn't it be nice? But then those nice things are attached with more responsibility. So it's this huge thing where that applies to like everything, where we want the things that involve responsibility, but we don't want the responsibility. We just want the nice things. So I guess that's where my mind was at when it comes to this.
But it's a fair observation.
And so
if you think about it, it's what I was saying.
Yeah.
There is the assumption of responsibility is the price for the nice things.
Yeah.
And if you don't want the responsibility, you don't get the nice things. But if you want the nice things, you get the responsibility.
But I guess for me, I feel like being able to handle more things and more responsibility is itself a benefit and not just a cost.
It certainly broadens you.
Yeah.
But you've got to be willing to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, Let's put this another way. If you're absolutely not willing to to accept the responsibility, that's the choice you make. But you shouldn't be envious of those who were willing to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like with children. When you're raising them, they're very, very difficult. But there are pleasures that parents have that non-parents will never have, just as there are pains they'll have that non-parents will never have. I think part of the reason my generation, as a rule, was such terrible parents was because they were not willing. They were willing to take the good stuff and not the responsibility. They were willing to enjoy the creation of children, but not willing to put themselves out for their nurturing. I like to say that my generation, we're in the unfortunate position of growing old without ever growing up. And that's a tough combination. Because, again, with children, they have to be more important to you than yourself. You notice how all this is pulling you away from yourself, whether it's a woman, whether it's friends, whether it's children. This is all in terms of pulling you away from yourself. But because we're all terribly selfish creatures, there is something within us that fights against it. Why do you think our Lord talks about doing damage to your nature? Well, that's because our nature is to be selfish. Our nature is to be all about me. And the minute you extend yourself, you've got to fight to do it properly, which you should, because being all about you is the easiest way to emulate Satan in the end. And you'll notice, too, speaking of old bachelors, you'll notice that old people don't, when they live alone and all that, they get weird.
You've talked about this before.
I have. I speak as I like to say, this institution's resident creepy old man. Why do you think that is? It's because any of us left to ourselves become strange and peculiar. And you just don't have that luxury. The more that you give yourself to other people, the less you have that luxury. Although it's a luxury that, in the end, is kind of poisonous.
Yeah, this reminds me of a question from a long time ago where you're saying a lot of similar things. The single state as a vocation, and you were talking about the challenges, and I very much agree with what you said, where it's actually probably the most challenging. Because the married state is a corrective on your nature. The religious state offers a corrective, but then with the single state, you don't have that corrective, and it seems like you have to work even harder.
You do. You've got to work very hard, and you've got to force yourself to be of service to people, because you have no outward requirement to do so. And one of the things, of course, that I've always found helpful as you get older is to remember that everything you've got, in terms of your experiences, in terms of your assets, whatever they are, they're only given to you to be of use to other people. And so what does that mean? Well, it means you've got to try to pass on what you were given. But you have to do so in a sort of provisional, not institutionalized way. And a very helpful thing is to ask yourself from time to time, how do you think the younger people you're dealing with now will remember you? How do you want them to remember you? It's a very useful thing, because you don't really want to be remembered as the strange, creepy old guy. You'd rather be remembered as the helpful fellow who was always there when the chips were down, and who always had something helpful, useful, or at least amusing to say. That's how you want to be remembered. And it also is a great corrective to any inclinations to vice you might have, because you don't want to be remembered as an old, an old drunk and all this and all that. You don't want to be remembered that way.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I don't know. Maybe some people would like to be. Yeah, I want to be remembered as the old town drunk. I want people to think back, did I ever tell you about old man Coulombe? Man, what a tosspot. That boy was never sober. Well, I can't really imagine wanting to be remembered that way. But if that's your idea of a good time, ladies and gentlemen, have at it. Don't let me stand in your way.
Yeah. Okay, so that was a really thought-provoking segment, Charles. Thank you for that. The video I mentioned, we have that on our channel, Vocation for Lay Single State. If you look that up, you'll be able to find it. It's a 7-minute video where Charles says a lot more really thought-provoking things. If you feel you're called to the lay single state. Okay, we have a lot of stuff from Connor, who does a very big introduction. So buckle up, everyone. All right.
It's going to be a bumpy intro?
Yes.
You are not rising to the bait this evening. You're a hard case tonight.
Well, you've taught me that I have to defend myself on some of these things, and I don't know. You just lay all these traps everywhere, and so I have to watch my step, right? I mean, that's just how.
What traps?
Yeah, what traps? Okay.
What
all right.
Do you hear yourself?
Yeah, I do hear myself.
Nah.
What? What are you gonna say?
I'm shocked.
Yeah, you're shocked.
Well, look, I don't know that it's true. I'll just leave that up to you.
Okay. Yeah,
but Peggy Sue got married not long ago. She's the one. I've been told. Now she's wearing a band of gold. Peggy Sue got married not long ago.
Well, at least we got that out of the way for this episode, so we don't have to go on in dread, worrying is the Billy Joel reference coming? That it's already happened, so we can.
Well, that's not Billy Joel. That's Buddy Holly.
Or Buddy Holly. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
But I will tell you this much though. I'm a traveling man. I've made a lot of stops all over this. What?
What is that? That's not Billy Joel.
No, it's not.
I don't. Okay. Anyhow,
it's Ricky Nelson. I'm a traveling man, made a lot of stops all over this world, and in every port I own the heart of at least one lovely girl. Well, you get the idea.
I know the song. I never knew who sang that.
It was Ricky Nelson. You know who his parents were?
The Nelsons?
Very good. Ozzie and Harriet. No, the Nelsons, the twins, I think were his children, his sons.
Okay. Very good, Charles. All right. We have
3 generations in showbiz. The Nelsons were a showbiz family, like the Franchinis were a
philanthropist.
A business dynasty.
Business dynasty, yeah. Okay. So from Connor.
All right.
He's titled this Revenge of the Magyars.
Ooh.
Okay. He goes on a really big rant. So let's indulge him, shall we?
Yeah, sure, why not? I mean, Magyars must be indulged, so they will burn your town. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The generalizations about Hungarians on the episode titled Magyar was a step too far. Looting? Pillaging? It's a Magyar thing? We Hungarians are not barbarians. We eat our raw horse meat just like everyone else, with a knife and fork.
Of course.
Wow. Okay. I suppose we all live in creepy castles and drink blood too, although a rampaging horde of barbarian vampires sounds pretty cool. And you're right. I guess you normies wouldn't understand our ways of doing business. We keep things simple. It's not that we're open, as you put it. It's that we don't have the patience for mind games. Speaking of games, it's a real slap in the face to provide the world with the greatest invention of all time, the Rubik's Cube, and still get flack for our wild days. To echo Joe Biden, come on, man.
Yes, but does he remember saying it?
We put our blood, sweat, and tears into that pinnacle of human civilization, and this is the thanks we get? You don't deserve our other gifts to humanity, like the ballpoint pen and our contributions to the sport of water polo. We are also taking back Miklos Rosa's music. You can watch Ben-Hur with a soundtrack by Danny Elfman or The Wiggles for all I care. Chariot races, runny. Wow.
That would have changed the whole tenor of the film. Chariot races, runny. Yeah, I like that.
My father has a saying. There are two types of people, Hungarians and those that want to be. And it's true. Seemingly every country adopted hussars in their uniform, including your precious France. And even hipsters are wearing our mustaches. Our style just can't be beat. Oh, and by the way, the houses of Habsburg and Anjou, how do you say it? Anjou, both of which you admire, were monarchs of Hungary. So as far as I'm concerned, if it's good enough for Anjou, it's good enough for you.
Ooh.
You've talked on the show now about the Holy Roman Empire, France, Spain, Britain, and many more. We even had a New Jersey episode. But the most important monarchy that has ever existed has never been given the time and attention it deserves. The Kingdom of Hungary, the land of King Saint Stephen, goulash, dashing hussars, and fabulous mustaches. Speaking of New Jersey, Andrew, let's form a New Jersey Magyar super PAC to combat this insensitivity. I never thought I'd fight side by side with a New Jerseyite, but I could fight side by side with a friend. I won't ask about the shore, and don't ask me where the gold and jewels we got from donors came from. Deal? Vincent, you are allowed to join. In conclusion, as a Hungarian American, it is important that I make sure Hungary receives its due love facts, here and now. I have thus formed several Hungary-focused questions to be answered. So by the power invested in me as a member of the custodial crew of Tumblr House, I hereby request Charles answer my questions to the best of his knowledge. It's time to throw a little paprika on the menu.
Chariot races, runny. Oh, golly. Yes, you know, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes it really does pay chewing through the straps in the morning. And that...
That's amazing that him and Andrew from New Jersey are friends, because their rants are structured in such a similar way with the same type of humor, and that's amazing to me. So well done, gentlemen.
I'm very grateful for it. I just have two words for you to say, however. One is Cleveland.
What does that mean?
It's a town in Ohio, a big city in Ohio, where the river caught on fire. What's that?
The river caught on fire? Why would you say that, though? How is that relevant to a Magyar discussion?
Because it is the center of Magyardom in the United States.
Really?
Yep. Cleveland, Ohio has the biggest concentration of Magyars of anywhere in the United States of America.
I guess that makes sense. Because
It's a steel building.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense because my Hungarian roots in terms of the United States, it's from Pennsylvania, so that's not too far away.
No. And it's Cleveland is very much the center. So the one thing I would say is Cleveland, and the other thing I would say is the Gabor sisters.
Yeah, so they're Magyar.
Oh golly! In fact, interesting story of the three: Magda, Jaja, and Eva. Eva, of course, was famous as the wife in Green Acres, and Jaja, well, she had the famous quote, "Of course I'm crazy. I'm Hungarian," which one can't argue with. But there used to be a Hungarian restaurant in the San Fernando Valley. I won't mention its name. It was very good. I really enjoyed it. But a friend of mine who's Hungarian was in there one time. And when he came there, Jaja was eating. And the owner / head waiter and the various other people kept coming on up to her. And the head waiter kept referring to her with a Magyar title that was speaking in Hungarian. And the title means in English, honored lady artist. And so he was constantly saying to her, honored lady artist this, honored lady artist that, and he was back and forth. And she was, ah. So as soon as Jaja leaves, he turns around and says to the customers and the help, old whore, in Hungarian.
Wow.
And my friend said to me, my countrymen have such a sweet, loving disposition. It's really, really very nice.
Wow. Since this is going to turn into another Magyar episode,
hey,
I have a relevant question. So, while I'm half Italian, my favorite food dish actually is chicken with halushkis. And so, is that Slavic or is that Hungarian?
Well, chicken with
halushkis. We call them halushkis. That's I was watching Edward Habsburg make these. That is basically dumplings with paprika, and you take the chicken drippings, and then
it's both.
It is both. That's what I thought. I thought it was both. Yeah.
You'll find that Central European cuisine is very similar, but there are variations, and they'll call take borscht.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically beet soup, but it'll be done differently. Goulash.
Yeah.
If I say pork goulash, yeah, it's all pork goulash, but the Hungarian version is different from the Slovak, is different from the Croat, is different from the German, it's different from the Austrian.
Yeah, I was shocked at that actually because I was watching Edward cook it, and he did. It was so different. It was amazing.
Well, he's Hungarian.
Yeah, he's Hungarian, so it's going to be more on that end. My grandma, because she was the cook, so I guess it would be more Slavic. Yeah, so it'd be more that style. Just interesting. But his version looked good too. I want to try all these different versions.
Well, see that's the thing. You'll find that it's a never-ending cavalcade of deliciousness.
Yeah.
And one of the Hungarian desserts that I'm really fond of, and you can't get in Vienna. At least I haven't been able to. But I've been able to get not just in Hungary, but in Slovakia and Croatia, which of course are under the Hungarians, is pureed chestnut.
Wow.
Oh,
I can't imagine that. I've never had anything like that. Pureed chestnut.
It's pureed chestnut, generally topped with whipped cream. And mind you, I mean whipped cream of the Central European variety, not our American petroleum product.
Yeah.
It.
In terms of desserts, I am quite partial to Italian pastries, I have to say.
Well, it's to be expected.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a host of questions from superfan Connor. So here we go.
All right.
First off, why say Magyar instead of Hungarian? Is it just easier to say? Is there some subtle difference between the two? I've noticed you both use the former far more on the show than the latter. I actually have never said Magyar. I always have said Hungarian. Charles is always the one who says Magyar, just like you say Scandinavian.
That's true. But no, I do say Magyar advisedly because it's ethnic as opposed to national. In other words, Hungarian refers to someone who lives in what is now Hungary. But you've got to remember that there are Hungarians/Magyars in Slovakia, in Transylvania, now Romania, in the Banat, in Croatia, and in the Burgenland, which is the easternmost state in Austria that was part of Hungary until late 1921. So when I use Magyar, I mean it for the ethnic Hungarians as opposed to the political boundaries.
I like that a lot. I like how it transcends that. That's good.
I mean, they obviously all Magyars are not all Magyars are Hungarian in the political sense.
Yeah.
Although, of course, they definitely feel themselves to be Hungarian in the political sense, but never mind.
Right. Yeah, so Connor just says, my family has never used the former unless we were talking in the language itself.
Yeah, well, it refers, I mean, Magyar is the language.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What is the historical relationship between the Catholic Church and Hungary? What are some good Catholic Hungarian customs?
Well, I mean, when the Magyars converted en masse, thanks to St. Stephen the King, they went almost overnight from being these wild raiders to being truly a pillar of Catholicism. The House of Arpad, which was the dynasty that St. Stephen was part of, produced 5 or 6 or 7 canonized saints, which is pretty remarkable. And also through the female line, they gave us St. Margaret of Scotland, who was whose mother was an Hungarian princess. So the Hungarians down through history were at the eastern edge of the faith and fought the Mongols and the Turks and various other obnoxious people. And, until the Reformation, were a complete pillar of the faith. And then after the so-called Counter-Reformation, resumed that position. They've certainly produced a great many saints and servants of God. As we speak, Cardinal Mindszenty, the heroic Archbishop of Esztergom, Blessed Vilmor Apos Vilmor, I guess I would say, who was the bishop murdered by the communists in 1947, 46. And a host of other people are either beatified, canonized, or en route. We had 2 in the LA area. We had 2 orders of nuns that were Hungarian in origin and whose founders brought the faith to areas that wouldn't have had it in Los Angeles. I mean, the Sisters of Social Service and the Society Consecrated to the Sacred Heart, one of whose Petrofi was the name of the lady that brought it to LA, Hungarian refugee. But our friend Tom Sullivan's younger sister is a member of that order. Plus, 2 refugee orders from Hungary played a big part in American post-World War II life. One was our own Norbertines in Orange County, who originally came from the great Norbertine Abbey of Czarna in Hungary. And then the University of Dallas in Dallas, Texas, that my dear old friend Fritz Wilhelmsen and his daughter Andrea have taught at. They were founded by Hungarian Cistercians from the Abbey of Zirz. So the answer is huge. As far as customs, their customs are typical of Central Europe. Very big on processions, Corpus Christi, Rogation Days, the Ascension, the Assumption. Obviously, they celebrate St. Stephen's Day, which is on a separate day from everywhere else. St. Stephen of Hungary has a separate feast day in Hungary, major feast. St. Stephen's Day, the day after Christmas, is celebrated with horses, horse racing and so forth, and riding, because St. Stephen the Deacon is the patron of horses in Hungary. I don't know why, but he is. And of course, the Marian devotion is very strong. They have a lot of shrines to Our Lady there, and she's called Our Lady, Queen of the Hungarians. And of course, the two great symbols of Hungarian nationhood after their patron, St. Stephen, are the Holy Crown of St. Stephen and the Holy Right Hand, which is in the Basilica in Budapest. I've seen it. It's clenched in a fist, which shows you, it's not in blessing, and it's not waving high. It's in a fist. So that tells you something. I don't know what, but no, they've got a ton of really, really marvelous customs, and of course, a lot of this stuff is really revived with extra oomph since the fall of communism. I need hardly say that under the current government of Prime Minister Orban, the Hungarians are at the forefront of trying to defend Catholic values in Europe.
We did a bunch of customs on Christmas Eve. We passed a shot glass of whiskey, and everybody takes a sip, regardless. Like, I even did that when I was young. And yeah, so you pass it around, and it always would end at my dad, and he would obviously have to finish what's left, so he did the sacrifice and downed it all.
Well, as an Italian, that was very hard.
Yeah. So that's one. Another tradition that Charles is very aware of and I think enjoys is the oplatki.
Well, no, see, that's Slavic.
Oh, is
that's
it Slavic?
Hungarian.
Oh,
that's
okay. So the Hungarians never did that, huh?
I don't think so.
That's interesting.
The Poles do it.
Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah. So that's basically a wafer that you dip in honey. It's similar to the Eucharist, but it's shaped in a rectangle, and it's got designs on it, religious designs, and it's very nice. And then it's always a big famine food meal before for Christmas Eve. You got babalki, pea soup, pierogies, that kind of stuff.
Now that's very Slovak.
Is it so? What do these Hungarians do then?
I'm not sure, but not that.
That's interesting. Okay.
Well, you got to bear in mind, your grandfather was Magyar, but your grandmother was Slovak.
Well, right. But I always figured that they would be very similar because they're landlocked countries. So as you know, where you have the Italian tradition is like 7 different fish.
Well, that's true. But see, with the funny thing about the Slovaks and the Magyars is that they're very similar, except where they're not. And I know that sounds funny, but in certain ways, certain customs, they are very, very much alike. But because the Slovaks are Slavs and the Magyars aren't, there are also a lot of differences. And yet, at the same time, there are people who consider themselves Slovak and have Magyar names, and vice versa.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, basically, the peoples of Central Europe are all very much entwined with each other. But then the emergence of nationalism in the 19th century made them want to assert their own identities as against each other. But the problem is their roots are so different, but their histories are so connected that
it's difficult to parse. Yeah.
What's that?
It's difficult to parse everything.
It's very difficult. And it's like the capital of Slovakia. In German is Pressburg. It was the Hungarian capital for a long time because Budapest fell to the Ottomans. So the Hungarian government and all that moved to Pressburg, or what the Hungarians call Poson, which the Slovaks, they had another name for it. I forget what it was, but they had another name for it in Slovak before World War One. But after World War One, they called it Bratislava. Now, if you use any one of those names around the others, they'll immediately correct you. So what I like to do when people get too annoying at me about it is I say, well, I could always call it Wilsongrad, which is what it was called during the short Slovak Communist Republic in 1918. And as soon as I say that, they'll, you know what, call it whatever you want, just don't call it that. then everybody quiets down and it's okay again.
I like that. It's very Coulombe of you.
Well, I mean, one thing I've learned in life is that if you can't please everybody equally, then displease them equally, and it's almost as good. See, that way no one feels they're being favored over the others. Just don't do that. But I don't understand. That's the other thing, is to deliver the obnoxious line as though you don't know any better.
Yeah.
Protected by stupidity.
Okay, please discuss history and importance of the Holy Crown. I read an account that said, quote, the Hungarians were not looking for a crown to inaugurate a king, but rather they were looking for a king for the crown. And the Holy Crown is the same for the Hungarians as the Lost Ark is for the Jewish people. End quote. You also touched on this concept in your book, as Blessed Charles needed to be coronated in accordance with the unique traditions of the kingdom. Why does monarchy, the Holy Crown, and their concept of kingship seem so unique to Hungarians compared to some other countries and peoples? Does this unique relationship give Hungary greater hope for a future monarchical restoration?
Well, yeah. In one word, yes, to all of it. The thing is that the crown of St. Stephen was given to St. Stephen, and because he epitomized Christian Hungary, so does his crown. And it really, I mean, everything that was said, like the Ark of the Covenant and all, it's quite true. It is the premier symbol of Magyar Hungarian nationhood. It's always called the Holy Crown, the Szent Corona. It rules the kingdom, and unlike all the other crowns of Europe, it is more important than whomever wears it. Now, with it, of course, has come the whole ideology of the lands of the Holy Crown, which refer to what is now Hungary, Burgenland, Slovakia, Transylvania, Banat, which is both in Romania and the Vojvodina in Serbia. These were considered the lands of the Holy Crown. Now, of course, as you'll have noticed, if you know your geography, they are not inhabited primarily by ethnic Hungarians. So, prior to the 19th century, this wasn't that much of a problem. But with the rise of nationalism in the 19th century, it became very difficult because, on the one hand, many of the Magyar, especially the liberal Magyar leadership, under people like Kossuth and Tisza and so forth, being a son of St. Stephen, being a real Hungarian, became, in their eyes, the same as being a Magyar. So that meant that the quote-unquote subject peoples had to be Magyarized. Now, this had not been a problem before. If you were Slovak or Romanian or Serb or Croat, you were a constituent member, shall we say, of the Holy Kingdom. But when being Magyar and being Hungarian were conflated, it immediately produced trouble. And what is interesting is that in 1848, when Kossuth declared the Hungarian Republic, and again, how can you have the Holy Crown and a republic? But there it is. The subject peoples revolted against Kossuth and rallied to the dynasty. Now, there are two ways you can look at that. You can look at them as nationalistic revolts, Slovak, Romanian, etc. But in another sense, you could say that they were actually fighting for the Holy Crown and for the old constitution of Hungary. Whether or not they saw it that way themselves, they can be seen that way by us. The other thing it's important to bear in mind, too, is that the Kossuth-Tisza view was not the only Magyar view. And you had a very strong pro-Habsburg, pro-Catholic element at the same time. It was epitomized by people like Stefan Széchenyi and the Zichy clan, who were the heart and soul of the Catholic Party in Hungary, really all the way until World War II. So these things are very complex, and so much depends upon how you want to look at them. But does this make it likelier that Hungary will one day have a monarchical restoration? Oh, sure. Because even though the crown is more important than the man who wears it, you've got to have someone wearing it for the crown to really be effective. It's interesting, too, that in 1946, the members of the Crown Guard were fearful of the crown falling into communist hands and being destroyed, so they smuggled it to the Americans. And until Jimmy Carter returned it to the communist government in 1979, I think, it was in the United States at Fort Knox. And then when he did return to the communists, they wanted it to legitimize their government, their rule over Hungary. Anti-communist Hungarians were scandalized. But at any rate, today you can see the crown in the lobby of the Parliament building in Budapest to show that it's still the supreme symbol of sovereignty in Hungary.
Okay. I'm calling you out on this one with your mocking of Otto the Great defeating the Magyars.
Ha ha!
Ha
ha!
Everyone remembers the 18 to 1900s as the age of the Vikings, but no one remembers that the Hungarians were raiding Europe at the same time. The impact of the Vikings are well known, but what about the impact of the Hungarian raids into Europe? What lasting effects did they have, if any?
Not much. I mean, the Magyars really wrecked a lot of stuff when they were wild and crazy. But, as I've said, once St. Stephen settled them down, they became a key part of the family of European nations. And to be honest with you, same thing happened with the Vikings. And like Hungary, each of the Viking countries owed their Christianization to a particular king. St. Olaf in Norway, St. Eric in Sweden, St. Canute in Denmark. And in Catholic days, before the Reformation, each of them played the role in the national consciousness that St. Stephen does today amongst the Hungarians. And so there's a big gulf in their pre-Christian and post-Christian history.
I've read that at its height, almost all of Hungary went Calvinist and Reformed during the Protestant Reformation. Why was Calvinism such a potent force there? How was the Counter-Reformation so effective in response? And what were the lasting impacts?
Well, it was potent in no small degree because of the Turkish conquest of Hungary. Because the Turks definitely favored the Reformed over the Catholics. And you've got to bear in mind that most of Hungary was conquered by Turkey. That's why the capital moved from where it had been to Poson, Pressburg, Bratislava, Wilsongrad. The vast majority of Hungary was under Turkish rule for a good 150, 200 years. And in that time, the Protestants, precisely because they were separating the people from Rome, which was seen as the great enemy by the Turks, were encouraged. Now, after the Habsburgs pushed the Turks out, they launched the Counter-Reformation in Hungary, whose leading light was Cardinal Pázmány. And I would say a good 75, 80% of Hungarians eventually would become Catholic. However, the Hungarian Reformed Church survives to this day. Interestingly enough, it has bishops, which no other Reformed Church has. And in fact, like the other Calvinist peoples, you had a Unitarian split off from the Hungarian Reformed, and they have bishops.
Unitarian bishops?
Unitarian bishops. Only in Hungary and Transylvania. Don't look for them anywhere else. Don't try this at home, kids. A Unitarian bishop. Don't try to do this yourself.
What do they do?
Unitarian bishops? They preside over the Unitarian churches.
But beyond normal ministers, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, what do they do?
Well, they're like the... what do you mean? What do? They do ministry stuff. So they preside over Sunday services.
They provide pastoral care.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, see, the other thing is that as bishops, this goes back to the Habsburg days, because the presiding bishop of both the Hungarian Reformed and the Unitarian churches were sort of the ambassador to the emperor. But the Reformed considered themselves to be the most Hungarian of the Hungarians, the most Magyar. And this is why people like Kossuth, Tisas, Admiral Horthy, they were all Hungarian Reformed. They weren't. Actually, so is Prime Minister Orban. And their relationship with Hungarian Catholicism is sort of interesting, kind of frenemy-ish.
Okay.
Isn't that a wonderful phrase, frenemy?
I'm not particular to it. Yeah. All right. What do you know about the concept of Turanism? From what I understand, this developed as a response to Slavic and Germanic nationalism, but goes so far out there as to claim Jesus was some sort of Parthian, Scythian, Hunnic prince.
Yeah. It was, I mean, like the other romantic nationalisms, it had some pretty crazy elements to it. But basically, one of the, I can't say problems, but one of the challenges the Magyars face is that unlike the Slavs and the Germans, they have very few in the way of kindred peoples. Because remember, they were a tribe that came from the east. So there are tribes in Siberia and so forth that are distantly related to them. But their closest relatives in Europe are also distantly related, are the Estonians and the Finns. And that's, as a result, we call that group of languages Finno-Ugric. There's supposed to be one phrase that's the same and equally comprehensible in Hungarian, Finnish, and Estonian, but only one, because they're very distantly related. Finnish and Estonian are much more closely related than either are to Magyar. But, I mean, they were all barbarian peoples that came out of the east and held on to their language. The Bulgars were the same, but they lost their language completely and were totally Slavicized.
Okay. What was the Budapest Smile Club?
I have no idea.
Sounds like some dental association.
Oh, that's funny. All right, now I'm going to cheat. Budapest Smile Club. I've never heard of that. Sounds weird. Creepy story of how Budapest became a city of smiles. Wow. That is weird. Oh gosh, I have heard about this. Oh, my. Okay. All right. I know what we're talking about. Okay. One of the strange things about the Magyars as a people is that they're really into suicide. They have the highest rate of suicide in Europe and always have
I
had.
thought that was Sweden.
Well, Sweden may be high now, but traditionally Hungary was the land of suicide.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh, well, the Hungarians are emotionally a very volatile people. My cousin Stefan is Magyar, and he used to tell the story of how in rural Hungary, when he was a boy, you'd go to a tavern on Sunday after Mass, and half the people would be sitting at the bar crying into their drinks, and the other half would be up dancing and all this kind of thing. If you came back a half hour later, he said, it would still be that way, but the halves would have reversed themselves. With the people who'd been dancing, crying at the bar, the people who'd been crying, dancing. So they're very, very volatile.
That's interesting, because I would have thought that the correlation would be between depression and suicide. Lack of emotion.
Who knows? But very often people act in haste when they're depressed. It's like being, as we used to say, this is an evil thing to say now because it's been superseded. But we used to say manic depressive. Now I think they say...
what, bipolar?
Yes, bipolar.
Yeah.
And of course, that's going to be replaced sooner or later. And then if you say bipolar, you'll be evil and wrong and should be canceled. But at any rate, that's quite a bit of the national psyche. So this song, after World War I, became very popular in Hungary. It was actually around the world, but the Hungarian version apparently resonated. It's called Gloomy Sunday. And it was very, very sad, and people would kill themselves right and left. So to try to combat this feeling of gloom and horror, the Budapest Smiles Club originated. And people would literally, the masks we wear now for the COVID
Yes,
disease.
I know the masks we wear now. Yes.
Yes. Well, they put on masks like that with smiles.
We're not too far off from this, I feel.
No. That's right. And I guess it was about as effective. Anyway, they ended up banning the song, so...
So people would wear masks with smiles.
Yeah. To try to combat the feelings of suicidal feelings.
Wow. When did this happen?
In the 1920s.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, you can hear Gloomy Sunday as sung by the late, much lamented Billie Holiday in English, but I've never felt suicidal after listening to it.
Was there ever any discrimination against Hungarians in the United States during either of the world wars? Both times Hungary was against the United States, after all, but I've never heard of anything other than against Germans, especially in World War I, and the Japanese during World War II. I've asked relatives, and no one has any idea.
Well, no, they wouldn't, and there wasn't, because you've got to bear in mind, I hate to say this, because it makes Americans sound stupid, but Germans and Japanese were very recognizable. But for most Americans who didn't know any better, which was most Americans, the Hungarians were simply yet another bizarre, unpronounceable Eastern European people who typically got thrown together as hunkies or bohunks. And hunky obviously comes from Hungarian, but bohunk is a portmanteau of Bohemian and Hungarian who didn't have anything to do with each other, except that they spoke languages that sounded like gibberish to the average American. I mean, the average American, even though he doesn't speak it, he can identify German, he can identify Scandinavian, yes, a generic term for the three languages. He can identify Spanish, French. He won't understand them, but he knows what they are when he hears them. But all of the Eastern European languages, whether Slavic or Hungarian, just sounded like gobbledygook. So they lumped them all together without really understanding the differences between the Poles, the Slovaks, the Czechs, the Hungarians, the Romanians, the Croatians, and so on. Serbs, they're all the same, bohunks, hunkies. So as a result of that, while it's kind of obnoxious and demeaning in one way, it saved them being singled out for abuse in another. And also don't forget that Hungary was not really, although it was, we were against them in 2 world wars, it's not like Hungary was the major enemy in either of those wars.
Yeah. I read that when Romania invaded Hungary and drove out Bela Kun, the king of Romania was offered the Hungarian crown. Is this true? Can you provide any further detail?
Not a lot, because I hadn't heard that. I know they did this, and of course, it allowed Admiral Horthy to come to power as the admiral on horseback, the sailor on horseback. But that they had offered the crown to King Ferdinand, this I hadn't heard. If anybody did, it would have been the so-called free electors, people like Gombusch, who were anti-Habsburg, basically. But I doubt very much, given the Hungarian antipathy to Romanians, especially because of the Transylvania issue, I doubt very highly that that would have gone anywhere.
Please discuss the Treaty of Trianon and its impact up to the present. Do you think the pre-1918 kingdom borders could ever return, maybe in some federalized form? Also, what should happen with Transylvania? Based off your opinions on how the Holy Land ought to be administered, I figured you would have a unique view into how it could be handled.
That's the Treaty of Trianon. And remember that the boundaries of the Kingdom of Hungary were, until the end of World War I, they were what's now Hungary, Burgenland, Slovakia, Transylvania, the Banat. Croatia was associated with Hungary. It was kind of an odd thing. The King of Hungary was King of Croatia, but they were separate kingdoms. So the Emperor of Austria was King of Croatia by virtue of being King of Hungary. A little involved there. And then at the end of World War I, toward the end, Kaiser Karl gave gave Croatia with the assent of the Hungarian government, which was required. He gave them equal status with the Kingdom of Hungary, so-called trialism, and he united the Croatian areas of Austria with those of Hungary into an independent kingdom, whose flag you see behind me. It's a very vexed question because on the one hand, the countries that belonged to the Crown of St. Stephen before, they were separated from Hungary by the Trianon. I mean, the Trianon Treaty created more or less the current boundaries, where modern Hungary is just an island in the middle of what was. It left large Magyar minorities in each of the successor states, in Slovakia, in Romania, in Croatia, in Serbia, Vojvodina. The effects were to exacerbate the national antipathies between the Hungarians and their various former subjects, now neighbors. And that antipathy has gone on to the present to a great degree. It's tragic for a number of reasons, not least of which the fact that apart from those national antipathies, the Hungarians have more in common with their immediate neighbor countries than any of them do with outsiders. The Slovaks, the Romanians, the Croats, the Serbs, well, not the Serbs so much, but the Croats. Their values are very similar. They're currently being pressured by America and Western Europe, or the leadership in those countries, to adopt immoralities that they find wrong. These are things that ought to bring those countries together in a united front against the horror. But the national question and the memory of the Trianon keeps getting in the way. Certainly, the restoration of the pre-1918 boundaries, I really doubt could ever happen. But a federalized Central Europe, bring together all of those countries in a loose federation with each other, with a Habsburg at the head of it, that's something that I think is quite possible and certainly to be hoped for and worked for. I did an interview originally in Magyar that was translated into Slovak, and I was very proud of that because to have something to give an interview in Magyar that your Magyar interviewer agrees with, and then to have it translated into Slovak approvingly, that I really felt like I'd done something. I felt very good about that. And if I could find it quickly,
on what?
I'll give you the last bit of it, which I think is an important one. Let me see. I found it. At the end of the interview, he asked me about he says, last but not least, what would be your message to the Hungarian monarchists? I said, in 2009 at the Epiphany, I was in Budapest where I attended the Tridentine Mass in the parish church of the Assumption in the city center. It was a festive choral mass with Haydn pieces. Beautiful church, Baroque style, and lots of young people attending the Mass. It ripped through me that the enemies of the faith could only destroy, not build. Everything that makes life valuable, beautiful art and music, the joy of youth, the joy of family, reverence and piety, belongs to faith. The enemies may destroy everything, but their children will rebuild it. This is your legacy, the crown of St. Stephen, the saints of the Kingdom of Hungary, the protection of Christianity in Europe. The brave nobility stand for Maria Theresia, Count Istvan Széchenyi, and the people who stood up for Karl IV. That's Blessed Emperor Karl, King Karl IV of Hungary. Next to who stood up for Blessed Karl IV during his attempts at restoration. You were truly blessed with such an historical background. It can be hard to be worthy of it. But as was shown in 1956, the spirit of Hungary cannot perish. It can only hide for a while. But remember that in all the successor states of the Habsburg Empire, as well as in all of Europe and overseas, there are those who believe the same as you. Especially in these days of globalization, it is important to know about those who are fighting for the same goals as you. Be they Slovaks, Croats, or others. And this is the important part. Let Hungary truly be the country of the Holy Crown, and its neighbors will inevitably approach it, not as a partner, but not as a conqueror, but as a partner in the reconstruction of the Christian empire built by St. Stephen. Many details of the history of Central Europe were written in blood, but by no means the whole. It is my great hope that all the peoples who once lived under the auspices of St. Stephen's Crown should look at each other and their neighbors in Austria, Poland, Romania, and Serbia as their king ancestors, as brothers under the guidance of a common father. Be the kind of country that will attract its neighbors to emulate it. That's the thing. Where Kossuth and the Tisas and people like that attempted to Magyarize the peoples around them. Instead, be an example for the peoples around you to follow.
It's a very nice ending to a Magyar episode. Very fitting. Okay, that'll do it for this episode.
And remember, Budapest waits for you.
Not quite. But if you'd like to become a patron, you can do so for as little as $5 a month. You get access to the pre-show, early access. I usually release it on Saturdays or Sunday. And so it's almost double the content if this just wasn't enough for you today.
If your fix wasn't deep enough. But before we adjourn, there's something important to bear in mind.
I don't want to bear in mind things. I'm too scared.
Don't be scared. Monday is Monday in the octave of the Ascension.
Oh, okay, that's good. Yeah.
So the Ascension tide goes on. Next Sunday is Pentecost, the third great festival of the Christian year, up there with Christmas and Easter. So you really, really, really want to observe it. I have to say that one of the things I love about Pentecost, and why when I can I go to both the Tridentine and the Byzantine Pentecost, is that in the Tridentine Mass, in the Latin Rite, the dominant color is red for the fire of the Holy Ghost. In the Byzantine, it's green, and they bring all sorts of pine boughs and so forth into the church to show the enlivening aspect of the Holy Spirit. And if you think about it, these two facets taken in tandem, they really tell you a lot about the nature of the Holy Ghost and what He does. It's really, really wonderful. And also don't forget that during the Middle Ages, it was kept as well as the other two great feasts. And time and again in the Arthurian legends, it'll open up with King Arthur kept Whitsun, or usually you would say Whitsun, kept Whitsun at Caerleon upon Usk, or at Camelot, or at Carlisle, or any one of his other capitals. So keep Pentecost well, ladies and gentlemen. And like Christmas and Easter, the two following days were kept. Whit Monday and Whit Tuesday, after Whit Sunday. So be sure to celebrate them. And, remember that it's your life.
Yes. Okay, I don't know what reference. I don't really care. But remember, too, if it's Monday, it's off the menu.
And the So You Save may be your own.
See you next time, everyone.